Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Proof of Delivery. This is, as Tim Higgum, our good friend, branded it, the Convoy Secrets episode, where we're going to hear all the secrets from the Steve Jobs of freight. Bill, you know what, Bill? This is really embarrassing. Dreigert.
It's German. It's a long E. Yeah.
That is really embarrassing. So I apologize. But again, a man who needs no introduction, Steve Jobs over here. We're going to talk all things Convoy. We've been working together now. Been working together for 3, 4, 5 months. And it's been a blast. We've got a ton of exciting stuff to share. So we're going to go back in history, talk about beyond the founding story of Convoy and how we got here, really all the way back to how did freight start to digitize 25 years ago. So really looking forward to it. How are you doing, Bill?
Good. Excited to finally be on Proof of Delivery, our in-house podcast.
That's right. Congratulations, you made it.
Yeah.
Well, let's start off just talking a little bit about Convoy today. We acquired the tech assets from Flexport, I think July 30th.
July 30th.
Yep.
Yeah.
So just kind of paint the picture of where we are now. It's been a couple of months. How big is the platform? Who's using it? What's happening in 2025 right now?
Yeah. So post-acquisition, we saw a pretty dramatic acceleration of inbounds, of course, being part of the DAT network, which is part of the thesis and part of why this was so exciting. Just to kind of give the quick soundbite, right? The Convoy is an end-to-end execution platform that for a broker, they can post a load and it will just automatically, magically disappear off the platform if it's fully integrated. And on the carrier side, they can manage it from end to end. And it's an app-centric carrier experience, though. So carriers log into the app, they see a load, they hit book, they manage tracking all the way through, and they get paid at the end. And all that is just end-to-end encapsulated within the app. And it's the only product in the market that is a neutral marketplace that allows a carrier to access loads in that way and book them end to end. And for the brokers too, they know that those carriers are vetted, they're trusted. The carriers are signing the broker carrier agreement through the application, so it becomes the broker's carrier. They have full control. It's just it's unique end-to-end capability that was built through the $1 billion investment at Convoy and dog-fooded as they were building a brokerage, and so just a very refined experience. As we were bringing it back to market, it's a startup. It was a startup within a startup as we were building that back up within Flexport. Now that we're on DAT, we have the power of the full DAT ecosystem. And a lot of the focus right out of the gate has just been, how do we bring this to our existing partners within the network? And then how do we start taking that technology and applying it across the full DAT network? So as I touched on, one of the values is this vetted carrier network. So one of the first things we did is say, okay, how can we take that technology, which we call Carve, and deploy it across the full DAT network? We have over 50,000 users on the Convoy platform, but DAT has 200,000 plus users on the DAT platform. So how do we overlap those networks and start to apply that fraud vetting across the full DAT network? That's one of the first things that we did right out of the gate. The other is just starting to package it within the full DAT system, because DAT, as we go forward, our vision, as we've spent a lot of time discussing, is how do we bring that automation across the full suite of DAT brokers and carriers, and how do we bring that end-to-end experience? And Convoy was more narrow than DAT is, and the DAT has to be all things to all people, and it's the biggest marketplace. And the benefit of DAT, of course, is just that it's the network. And in the 47 years of DAT history, you've built this incredible product that serves every single niche. But as we bring the automation, then we've got to bring it to that same set of customers on both sides of the market, and that's just going to take time as we do that. But we're accelerating down that path, which is exciting. And that vision is just becoming a lot more clear as we go down this path. And of course, we've spent a lot of time discussing that. But I think 2026 is going to be pretty exciting in terms of what we're able to deliver. And we're already, we're of course getting tech partners at every part of the ecosystem. I know we'll talk about it a little bit later, but like on the TMS side with McLeod and Send, we've been able to launch those partnerships. And now that we're, as DAT, we just have a lot of touch points with those TMSs, and we're just, as a result, bringing so much more value to our broker and carrier partners. But we've got a lot more lined up. So
yeah. Well, I definitely want to go back. I want to go back in a little bit and talk more about how carriers started using the app and why the app is so powerful, because I think that is what makes Convoy stand out from all of the other DFMs. We were talking about this the other night in the marketplace, but you mentioned TMS integrations. I mean, that's obviously been a huge focus. Talk to us a little bit more about, idea sounds great. End-to-end automated freight matching. Sign me up. I'm going to be able to lower my costs. Sounds like secure carrier access. How do brokers today actually get in there and start using it? And where are we in terms of making it accessible to DAT's massive broker network?
Yeah, and freight is complicated and highly fragmented at every point of interface. And the ideal Convoy experience is that for brokers that they don't have to think about it, right? That it's just this magical booking experience. Well, meaning the way I often describe it is like just having an extra carrier pod or carrier sales pod where they're booking freight and managing freight and negotiating and executing and tracking it. And you don't have to worry about it. It's like magically moving off the board. But for that to happen, you have to have integrations deep within the TMS because you're managing load state, right? The loads are booking and you've got to make sure that you don't have race conditions where somebody's booking a load and it got booked over here and you don't have visibility. So got to have real-time integrations on load state. We want to have tracking integrations because the benefit of the app is we have incredibly high compliance on tracking. 99% plus. Drivers over the last 10 years have learned and gotten just used to using the app to track, keeping the app live and managing through the app. So you want to have tracking integrations. And then the payment side, you want to have payments integrations because you want to have visibility to the POD, right? You want to have know when the load's been paid, right? You have to be able to manage and on the front end too, you want to have onboarding integrations because we field the broker carrier agreement directly to the carrier. And so the carrier signing the broker's agreement, and then the broker compliant can go through their own compliance process, or they can, use the vetting processes that are built into the Convoy platform. But all those require integrations. And there are a lot of TMSs in the market, and we've been partnering with, working through some of the best in the business. I've mentioned McLeod and Ascend. So to give an example of what that looks like, with McLeod, they have a digital freight management, a DFM product and suite that they've built out. And DAT was already a legacy partner with that product. And we recently launched our native integration with McLeod. And that just simplifies the integration. We've had integrations that take less than a day now on the McLeod platform because it just simplifies every point of interface. Because it's really about standardizing how that data is transferred back and forth and just coming up with a standard way of talking between these systems, then making sure that every one of those capabilities is enabled at least in a minimum way so that we can get all those benefits of the execution. But because we touch every part of the load, it is a more complicated integration than traditional integrations. If you're only doing one of those pieces, then you have fewer APIs, fewer processes that you have to automate within the TMS. Ascend is going to be pretty exciting too. Very looking forward to that. We're in that process right now, right at the precipice of launching Ascend. We announced it earlier in the year, but we're right at the launch precipice. But that's Ascend has a free product. Ascend has really built a kind of full service end-to-end TMS capability. We're going to have a fully integrated native capability within that. That's really, I think, going to be the gold standard of every step of the process can be automated. Brokers will be able to onboard themselves through that tool. It's really much more self-service by the nature of Ascend's customers too, because they really service the long tail very well, both in the carriers and the broker side. So I'm pretty excited for that one. That's been a work in progress, and that team has put in a ton of work, and it's been great to work with them. But as we go into 2026, of course, we will continue to move down that path. But yeah, it's TMS is a critical partner because it's the source of record for most brokers. And like I said, different TMSs target different segments in the market, have different capabilities. I think for any broker, do vet if you look at a change of TMS, vet the options out there. McLeod and Ascend are great options, but there's many partners out there to vet through. But I think as the market goes, as we move into the future, having that ability to drive automation to auto book, right, is going to allow brokers to drive more operational efficiency in the back end and also just access more capacity. Because the other thing I always just talk about with Convoy is historically it's been smaller carriers. Now that DAT has all carriers, but historically the advantage of Convoy is it automates part of the market that's just been difficult to access before for brokers, that takes more labor. Because I know, having gone through this process at Convoy and Uber Freight and others, when you deal with owner operators, small carriers, it just takes more work per load transaction, because just by the size of the carrier, they're smaller, they have less assets, so you got to make more phone calls to book more freight. But those are also the carriers that are most, I'd say, eager to use automation, because it gives them more access, and it gives them access to more brokers. So on the broker side, then that just means that segment of the capacity is all of a sudden just easier to manage, and gives you a lot more access to carriers that you can bring into your network as well. So,
well, let's go back in time a little bit to pull on that thread that you just brought up of getting small carriers, owner operators to use technology. So you've been in the industry quite some time, starting with all the way back, early employee at Coyote. Would love to hear your perspective on how adoption of automation for both brokers and carriers has evolved over the last, call it 20 years. And when did you start to realize, because I suspect it was pretty early on, that something like this end-to-end automated matching and execution would be the future?
Yeah. And the way I always frame it up is that at Coyote was, so I came into the market with Coyote. That was my introduction to brokerage. So I missed, there was a whole phase of technology development that I missed. And, the old the old guard will always tell stories of, Post-it notes on whiteboards, and like managing loads, like via Post-it notes and stacks of cards and things like that. And part of the story of American backhaulers, which, that team, Jeff came and did Coyote, and Paul started Command. Part of the story of that their journey was developing tech and building one of the first very effective internal TMS platforms, in the first TMS or internal brokerage platform that really supported what became the Chicago model, with carrier and shipper side separation of operations, but also that created a common internal load board. Because Robinson at the time, in the 80s through 90s, was all office by office, the 250 plus offices, that was cradle to grave, and they managed their own load boards. And the big story back then was that, that made it very difficult for them to manage big national accounts, because you need to be able to coordinate across the whole country. And having one central office and one central TMS meant all of a sudden everybody was looking at all the loads, and you can understand how that drove efficiency. So that first wave of efficiency in tech and brokers was really, everybody has visibility to the loads. And once everybody has visibility to the loads, then you can create all sorts of tools on top of that, which I put a truck in, and I immediately see all the loads that would match that truck. It sounds very basic today, but that was a new idea, right? In the early 2000s, that was still like, not many brokers had that capability. And then you build on top of that, because then of course, like, you're putting trucks in, those trucks are generating loads. Well, okay, how many trucks did I have last week? What do I have this week? You can start to build all this probabilistic load matching, and which then you can use to say, which carrier should I call next? And then why should I call them? Which load should I talk to them about? And all that is then presented to you in one place. But all of that tech is really about making a carrier rep more efficient, right? Or a account manager more efficient. So presuming these roles exist, that these are the roles that you want to drive and drive efficiency with. And it's really in the four walls. So then what happens, and owner operators as a segment was a tip at Coyote, we had a hot pod. So you came in fresh out of college, and you went to the hot pod, and the hot pod was taking inbound calls off of DAT and typically working with owner operators. And so once you matured, and while you're taking inbound calls off DAT, you're trying to also build a portfolio of carriers that you can work with consistently. So, you work with XYZ carrier, you start to book a few loads with them. They're always running, Canton to Indianapolis, and eventually now you've got a relationship, and you're getting Canton to Indianapolis from whoever, and now you've built a relationship. Then you have a portfolio, and typically you build a portfolio of 30 to 50 carriers, and that was just like, that's the normal process. But those owner operators, it's very difficult to deal with small carriers, owner operators. What you want to do is get the carriers that have 200 trucks. Like, that's the sweet spot for a broker, because I can call my guy Joe at Smith Transport, and I can book 15 loads, because I know that they're running these lanes consistent. And that's just, for me, if I'm commission driven, that's just the most efficient way to operate versus calling 15 different carriers or 100 different carriers to book 15 loads. And so what happened then is, that model continued to evolve, and still even today, that's really that Chicago model and the central TMS and building on that and like driving efficiency in that model still yields benefits today. And it's how most of the larger brokers still operate. But what happened then is Uber came to market. What Uber really did was it made everybody realize that there's ways of operating like through the app where you can start to build technology that you can put in the hands of carriers.
Yep.
And that was really the pivot. And more than anything, the Uber Freight model or the digital freight model or the Convoy model was enabled through app usage of small carriers. That's really where it was differentiated. And of course, this huge wave of investment, 2014 to 2020, billions of dollars put into building digital freight models, and that's where Uber Freight and Convoy being the sort of like I'd say the most
poster children.
Yeah, poster children of that wave. But the focus then it became very clear early on that this particular market fit for small carriers was where the value was.
Mm-hmm.
But both Uber Freight and Convoy also tried to go well beyond that and really automate every single piece. And we can all debate the success of that and whether or not it worked, but the tech worked, and clearly there was a piece of that model that worked very well. And I think also what happened is just like any tech, you kind of went through your adoption curve and through the trough of disillusionment. And I think part of what's been exciting about going through this process with Convoy is like knowing like it was very obvious that there was value there. So then it was when the opportunity to relaunch Convoy came up, it was how do we really just zero in on where that value is, and then how do we bring that value to the whole market? And that value was in that full automation. It really was in that app-centric booking model, end-to-end execution. But I think that's the next wave. So DFM, I think there was the test run, right, with trying to build brokerages on top of the tech. Now I think we're in the wave of being able to actually like expand and see the value out of that technology. And I think it will be no other place than DAT to do that with the Convoy tech. As we go into the future, of course, now we're in this AI wave, and I think we're still early on that hype curve. So I don't think we've gone through the trough of disillusionment or the adjustment, or
it's coming.
Yeah, finding where the value is yet, but there clearly is value there. I mean, we use AI quite extensively internally, in all different types of capabilities, and are getting value for it. But also, I just don't think the market's not going to be able to support the level of investment or the number of companies that have come to market in this space. So it's going to be very interesting over the next 2 to 5 years. But there clearly will be winners, and there's going to be opportunity here. I think part of the challenge of the way AI is playing out in the brokerage space is that oftentimes it's just you're taking an SOP, which may not be efficient or the best way to do something, and then you're just putting AI on top of it versus really re-engineering that SOP. I mean, I see this most acutely as we go to market with the Convoy tech, because the Convoy execution process has been really engineered end to end to be highly efficient, and it's very deterministic. I hit a button, I have a load, I track it, I hit, say I tracked it. You don't have to use AI in a lot of these processes because it's just I hit a button. It's like if you went to Amazon, you wouldn't need AI to necessarily buy something you want, right? Or to know that it's delivered. You wouldn't need AI through that process. Now there's AI that can supplement and add value through the process, but it doesn't necessarily just solve that problem in the most efficient way. But there's a lot of processes in brokerage where you do benefit from AI because it is so fragmented. Because you may be, you need to schedule an appointment with a elementary school because you're delivering to their dock for food, right? So, and of course, they're not going to have a TMS or an automated scheduling platform, or you're not going to be able to code to them via API. So there's always going to be these long tail situations where having voice AI or email AI or other capabilities that solve for the fuzziness and all the different channels and the fact that it's not deterministic will be a benefit. But I think for like high velocity core freight, most of that should be engineered to just be automated end to end without having to throw a lot of AI around the edges, or generative AI or agentic AI capabilities.
Yeah.
And then the next phase, if we're going down the tech path, I think will be AVs, which I do think that's coming. But
well,
I can talk about that, but that's yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah,
Maybe that's a whole other podcast. So going back to what you're just talking about, AI and Convoy platform driving efficiency, how brokers operate drives a lot of efficiency. Show me that. What is actually happening with our customers who are using the technology, and how is it benefiting them?
Yeah, and I know we had Dan from Ally on a couple podcasts ago, but I was on site with Ally, I don't know, 2 months ago, and talking to that team, and I remember them just saying, "Oh, it's when it works, it's just like magical because the flow just books." Because if you the way most brokers use the platform is they post the majority of the freight to the platform. They set the price, so they set a max pay, and that's important because the way with the way you price Convoy platform is we effectively take a fee out of that, a percent fee, and they price it in a way that they know they will always be profitable. And they can do that by indexing it to customer rate or a variety of ways. But they know that if it books on the Convoy platform, it's going to be a positive for me because I'm going to save labor and I'm going to buy well and I set the rate as such. And then when it books, so then say you put the price in at $1,000, it shows up on the Convoy platform. We actually then dynamically manage the price and the bidding. So you may have put it at 1,000, but we think, you know what, we think the market rate's 940. We're going to present it to the carriers as such. Carrier sees by now, carriers almost all bid. So carriers have the flexibility that, you know what, 940 is not the right price for me. I'm going to put in, 990, and then we may have counter bidding within there. Let's say we settle it at 980, book it. Then on the broker systems and the TMS, that load then shows as booked. And if the carrier is not yet set up with the broker, as I mentioned earlier, they're showing the broker carrier agreement. So they're signing the broker carrier agreement with the broker. Broker can decide whether or not they want to automate that approval process, but they have a lot of brokers want to go through their own compliance process, or they're using other tooling for that. So then it goes through their compliance process. They approve it. Then the carrier is managing it through the app, and the tracking information will automatically tracking and milestone. All the milestone data is picked up, or they dispatch. All that will automatically update through the TMS and through the application. And again, the platform was built for Convoy when Convoy was a broker. Very, very clearly, we are no longer a broker. It's just the tech, but all the workflows that you would need then are built in and were automated as part of that process. So at the end, then load delivers, marked as delivered. They upload the POD, broker approves payment, carrier gets paid. We pay the carrier through the platform. All that's just automated end to end. So from a broker perspective, every one of those steps can be fully automated. And so brokers that have been on the platform for a long time tend to automate more as they go. So like as an example, out of the gate, you may say, hey, I want to approve all of these manually out of the gate before I set any sort of automated rules, because I just want to see the carriers that have come through and I want to build confidence in it, which is perfectly normal. But what we see over time, and I shared some information earlier, but every broker that's been on the platform tends to grow usage of the platform because it's a whole new way of doing business, and you've got to integrate it in your own processes, and everybody's going to do that, different ways, and every broker operates slightly differently. There's 20,000 plus brokers, so there's a high variance in how they think about the market, how they want to run their business, how they want to utilize, small carriers or their core carriers, how much contracted business or spot business they might have. We see this at DAT as well. It's like some brokers use DAT quite heavily, some do not, and everybody has a different strategy in how they show up to market and how they service their customers, which of course is also driven by customer mix and freight mix. And like every shipper, right, is a snowflake. Every shipper is slightly different in terms of how they come to market. And so the brokers tend to have different capabilities to match the capabilities of their shippers as well. But ultimately though, every broker can benefit because they get that automation, they get access. It's access to more capacity. And I think the other key thing is that carriers like to go here first because it is so easy. So carriers, what we see is, the cohort of carriers that use it consistently, like that's the only place they want to go because it's just so easy. And they can do everything within the app. They don't have to worry about it. And now, as we continue to scale the platform, they have access to more and more freight. So the value of the carriers continues to increase as well.
Yep. Access to capacity is what everyone in the brokerage space is after. But I actually think it's more nuanced than that, especially in this day and age, trusted capacity. So you mentioned earlier CARB. Let's talk a little bit about that. automation sounds great. I, can automate my vetting processes, automate my compliance processes with Convoy. Okay, I can imagine how that saves me time, money. But the downside of that is, what if a bad actor gets to the system? So I think it's a really interesting story about how Convoy has built this technology to almost essentially eradicate that from the network. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, this was a huge part of the the value proposition as we went through this this process, because like everybody, Convoy, when they were brokering freight, and we had this, we went through this at Uber. Every broker went through this during the pandemic, where you saw an explosion of fraud, and particularly in like 2022, there was this whole string of technology thefts, particularly like large claims in the tech space. What's interesting, and I'll just start with this story, is there was recently there's a long-term investigation that recently resulted in the prosecution of this organization called the Sing organization, which was like this notorious circle of fraudulent actors out of California that a lot of brokers are familiar with. Well, it finally came to a head, and we'd been tracking that particular organization for years and have not had a single theft as a result from that organization since 2022 or so. Across the entire Convoy network, we've had over 700,000 loads go through the system, and only 2 carriers have snuck through. And we've had four thefts now as a result of 2 carriers across 700,000 loads that have gone through the system, which I would hazard. I strongly suspect that nobody can claim a similar record of that scale in terms of fraud prevention. And the way that is achieved is there was an incredible investment in ML modeling around forensics, and forensics that tie all the way to, I don't want to reveal all of our secrets, but that get very
episode.
Yeah. That get very, we'll have to have that separate. We'll have to have Eric on at some point too. Yeah. It gets very granular in terms of like looking at like individual behaviors and identifying information. And we have these incredible dossiers of information on some of these investigations that the fraud team has put together, which like, again, I don't think anybody else in the space is going to this level of detail and rigor. And really it's about the way that Convoy solved this was really just going super deep on every single case that came through and ensuring that every single potential vector was closed off robustly and in a way that was adaptive and driven by ML and intelligence and AI, so that we just shut it down, because it is very much just like behavioral pattern by behavioral pattern. And what's different there too is we had to solve it in that way. We had to be much more thoughtful about how we solve it, because we want to build an effective marketplace. You have to be carrier friendly and broker friendly. And so I think some other like brokers, if put in a corner, you can be very you can come up with policies that are very carrier unfriendly for different reasons, or you can come up with very blunt policies that, I'm not going to take carriers. A very common one was like no carriers less than 1 year of authority or less than 6 months. What you find in practice is oftentimes brokers will bend the rules if they're in a crunch, or if it's Friday evening and they got to move five loads. They will make these exceptions, but as a blunt rule, they'll often say, hey, no carriers for, and Convoy is an example. We've had brokers say, well, we don't use owner operators at all. It's like, okay, but that means you've cut out a significant percent of the capacity in the market, which means that you're going to pay more, right? And by and large, you think about owner operators, owner operators are some of the best capacity in the market. And we saw this at Uber Freight and Convoy. Some of the if you want to improve your on time, owner operators are, because they're small business owners, they're dedicated. Every single load matters. They don't want to lose access to this. This is their livelihood, right? This is how they pay their bills. And so, they're some of the hardest working, most consistent carriers in the market, because every load matters. Every load pays for their truck, right? Pays for it's money in their pocket. So cutting out those carriers means you've just cut yourself out from like a very high quality pool of capacity. The problem is that historically that has been the vector, right? It's the small carriers continually changing names, buying small MC numbers. Like that's been the vector for a lot of the fraud. So you have this incredibly high quality pool of dedicated actors being soured by a very small subset of bad actors who are just kind of continually re-engaging the system and trying to find a new way of engaging. And so we knew very early that if we could just carve them out and hence the name, right? If we carve out the bad actors, that as a result, we're just going to have a much higher quality network. And so it was very existential to making that model work, which is why it was so important. And also why I think a lot of the other approaches, because a lot of the other approaches in the market don't have that same level of granularity and aren't looking at it carrier by carrier, and aren't, it's not, they're not necessarily building it to build a healthy marketplace on both sides.
Yeah. And what I think is what stuck with me too is the Convoy approach to really driver and device level compliance, as opposed to the blunt carrier tool. I think that is really what makes a difference. And
because when it comes down to it, it's people, right? It's a person that that's their whole MO, and they're just going to keep trying. And as long as you can identify, oh, hey, it's him again, then you can not let them in the network.
Yeah. Let's pivot just to talking about what's coming next. So you mentioned TMS integrations, we're scaling the network. What are some of the big things you're pumped about in the Convoy and broader DAT ecosystem as we head into 26?
Well, this is one of them because we launched CMS. We have there's a lot, I'd say a lot of exciting things that are coming behind that. And because we have this carve technology, like bringing these things together, trust has been such a focus. That's where coming in, I don't think people realize just how far DAT has come on this journey, because I think it got a lot of flack, right? Rightly so 2-3 years ago. But over the last 2 years, it's just been this massive investment in CMS being a huge part of that. So I'm very excited about that. I think from a fraud perspective, I do think we've got the best tools, best capability, the best network, the best data to be able to solve this problem effectively for the industry. And so a lot more to come on that, but we've already made huge strides. So very excited about that as a capability. And then also just, all this automation, right? It's Convoy was built as this end-to-end experience. So everything is coupled. It works very well. It's fully engineered. Like it's this, beautifully engineered end-to-end experience. But brokers and carriers are all different parts of their tech journey, or different. They have different internal SOPs and very valid reasons why some of that may not all work for them. So as we come to market, part of, DAT had also been going down this automation journey. So this is also the exciting conversations we're having internally, is how do we bring all these tools together, and how do we think about partitioning in ways that work for every different broker and every carrier. Carrier is a perfect example, because we were very small carrier focused, very app centric. That's the best experience you can get. But there are other carriers that want to be much more TMS oriented, or if they're scaled, they have different operating models that we need to engage with. And similarly on brokers, I would say brokers, it's more, any broker today can benefit from this capacity pool, but they may have different parts of that process or different types of carriers they want to interact with, where they have different needs. So I think bringing automation, bringing these capabilities across the full DAT network is very exciting. And the products are still we haven't unified the onboarding process, right? There's clearly as carrier logs in, to be able to have a one view of the world. All that is, of course, coming. There's a lot of stuff which I think anybody on the outside could look in and say, well, clearly this is going to come, and it's probably coming. Going down that process. But for me, being on the inside of DAT, it's such an amazing opportunity in the space, because we're at this transformational moment of tech. Tech continues to evolve, but the pace of tech change, I think, in the last 10 years has been multiples of what it was the 10 years before that. And I think that will just continue. And DAT has a very unique position in the market, and I think we can bring just a ton of value in driving that. And I think if we didn't make this change to DAT, and DAT was not in this transformational moment, it would have been a lost opportunity for everybody, because DAT clearly, I think, can be a leader in the space, which is fun and exciting.
Yeah, we got big things ahead.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Bill, for taking us through the history and sharing more about what's actually happening behind the scenes and what's coming. 2026, or we will look back at 2025 as the year, like you just said, that DAT truly transformed. Or one of the moments of transformation, 47-year-old company. There have been these before. There will continue to be more of these moments, but I'm really looking forward to what we've got coming down the pipe with Convoy, and just appreciate having you on the team and hearing more about where you think this is all going.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's been great to work together. It's going to be a big year.
It sure is. Great. Well, thanks so much.